My significant other, Howard, had been staying out of town for a couple of days. When he returned, he lost control of his car during a heavy rainstorm and collided with another vehicle. He was lucky, but the other car wasn't. It crashed into a transmission tower. The driver, a single parent, had her 5-year-old child in the back. The child survived, but as time passed, Howard became consumed with guilt. I suggested he seek help, but he refused. I had to remind him every day that it wasn't his fault, that he was a good man, a wonderful husband, and an incredible father to our 7-year-old son, Oscar. "They haunt me, Sasha," he'd say, his hands shaking. I couldn't begin to imagine what that kind of trauma does to a person's mind. One of the hardest things was trying to explain to Oscar why his father was always sad and didn't want to play anymore. One night, I woke up to Howard shouting, "She's here. She's here, Sasha." It was just a bad dream, I assured him. But he pointed to the corner of the room, insisting she was there and wouldn't leave him alone. The room was empty, but I jumped when Oscar unexpectedly appeared. "Daddy," he said, frightened. Howard reached out to hug him, still shivering as he kept his eyes on the corner of the room. A few days later, Howard suggested he should stay with his parents for a while, just until he felt more like himself. As difficult as it was to hear, it was also a relief. I was exhausted and worried about how his behavior was affecting Oscar. Howard's parents lived 2 hours away, so we planned to visit him on weekends. Oscar clung to me for a few days, but started to relax with regular video calls to his dad. One evening, I was surprised to hear Oscar laughing while playing in his room. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard him laugh. I tiptoed upstairs, my heart warmed, and heard him say, "Do you want to have a turn?" I thought he might have invited a friend over without asking, which was against our rules. I knocked and opened the door. "Oscar, who are you talking to?" He was sitting on the floor with his toy cars alone. "Hey, where'd you go?" he asked, looking around. "Sweetheart, was there someone here?" "Yes," he replied. He was crying in the closet, so I invited him to play. That gave me chills. Why was he crying? Oscar shrugged. "I don't know, but he stopped when we started playing." The closet door was open, so I peeked inside. Nothing seemed out of place. When we visited Howard that weekend, Oscar's grandparents took him out for ice cream, giving Howard and me some alone time. It was the first time we'd been close in months. As we cuddled afterward, I mentioned, "Oscar has an imaginary friend." "Really?" he asked, shifting uncomfortably. "Yeah, he said there was a boy in his closet." I chuckled. They played with his toys. Howard took a deep breath. "You're probably right, Sasha. Poor kid's been through a lot, having to deal with, well, me." "Don't say that," I said. "He misses you, and you seem so much better. Your mom said you'd consider seeing a therapist." He squeezed my hand. "I think it might help. We need me back home soon. How about Oscar stays with you next weekend? Give me a little break." "He's a good kid," I said. "No trouble at all, but he'd love a weekend with you." Oscar was thrilled at the idea, even chatting about it with his new friend, but one night I heard loud banging from his room. "Stop it." I heard him cry. I ran upstairs to find him on the floor, crying. "What happened?" I asked. "Lucas doesn't want me to go to Dad's." "Lucas? That's your friend's name?" He nodded, showing me one of his toy cars, its front dented as if it had been smashed with force. "Lucas threw it on the floor," he said, pointing to a dent on the wood flooring. I could hardly believe my 7-year-old could cause such damage, let alone his imaginary friend. "Oscar, if you don't want to stay with Daddy, you don't have to." "I do," he replied, tearfully. "But Lucas said Daddy scares him." The next Friday, I helped Oscar pack a weekend bag. "Want to bring any toys?" "No, I'll leave them for Lucas. He doesn't want to be near Daddy." My heart sank. "Are you sure you want to go, sweetheart?" He nodded. "I can't wait." Howard picked him up that evening, and it was heartwarming to see our son run into his arms. "I'll drop him back Sunday," Howard said, kissing me. "Love you, Sasha." "Love you, too," I replied, waving them off, trying not to worry. They both needed this time together. That night, I invited some friends over for pizza and wine. We talked, danced and laughed, letting loose like we hadn't in ages. One friend stayed late and, while using the upstairs bathroom, asked me, "Oscars, definitely." I'm feeling particularly uneasy as I was left alone in the nursery. A little later, I headed to the supermarket, double-checking that all doors and windows were locked, anxious that the woman might return. I walked through the aisles on autopilot, my mind elsewhere, unable to shake thoughts of her. A part of me felt like I knew her from somewhere. That night, I sat in front of the TV, hardly paying attention. I just wanted my family back. I didn't want to be alone. As I contemplated calling a friend for company, a loud noise came from upstairs, causing my heart to race. I tried to ignore it, but eventually called a friend instead. Then, another loud bang echoed from above, freezing me in place. I hung up as my voicemail kicked in and decided to call the police. I knelt down, trembling as I climbed the stairs, gripping the hammer that came with our kitchen knives, a tool I'd never used, but it felt like a decent weapon for self-defense. As I approached Oscar's room, a child's crying became clearer. My fear peaked as I opened the door, only to find a little boy on the floor, whimpering while pushing toy cars around. I dropped the hammer. "Lucas?" I stammered. "When's Oscar coming back?" he asked without looking at me. I tried to stay calm. "He'll be home from his dad's tomorrow." "Daddy's a bad man," he said, taking a step closer. He crushed one of the toy cars against the floor, making me jump. "He did something terrible," he continued, finally looking up at me. Just then, a voice came from behind me. "No, darling, I'm not your mama." I nearly stumbled as the woman from earlier stepped past me to help Lucas up. "Who are you?" I demanded. "I think you know," she replied, walking out of the dark closet. "Don't leave your house, we'll be waiting." With that, the closet door slammed shut behind her. I ran downstairs, grabbing my phone and keys. I rushed to my car, fumbling to get the keys in the ignition. After a few minutes of driving, I pulled over and opened my phone to search for Imogen and Lucas, a mother and son who tragically died in a car accident. Their faces and names had once been familiar to me, but I'd pushed them aside to stay strong for my husband. It felt like we were being haunted. When I returned home, I went back up to Oscar's room, shuddering as the closet door creaked open. "Imogen and Lucas," I heard. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry for what happened. It was an accident," Imogen said, extending her hand. "Come inside." I shook my head. "Please leave my family alone." "Daddy did something terrible," Lucas insisted. "He didn't," I yelled. "It wasn't his fault. Leave us alone," I shouted as an unseen force pulled me into the closet and slammed the door shut behind me. The dim lighting allowed me to see Imogen's furious expression as she grabbed my arms. "I'll show you," she said, and then everything went black. Suddenly, I was in a bar with a girl, laughing about something. "He's been watching you all night," one of them said, nodding toward an attractive man sitting alone. He smiled as I caught his eye. "I'll get us some more drinks," I said, heading to the bar. "I don't usually do this," he said, leaning in. "But can I buy you a drink?" "I'm with the girls," I replied. "It's my round." "What if this round is on me in exchange for your number?" he suggested, grinning. I laughed. "That's quite forward. I'm only here for a few days, but you're the most handsome man I've seen in a while." Later, we ended up together in a small apartment. No, it was more like animals. It was only afterward that I noticed the ring on his finger. "You're a bad boy, Howard," I teased. He smiled. "You're hard to resist." We had a brief relationship, meeting whenever he visited the area. Eventually, I became pregnant, but I didn't tell him. I felt it was too difficult. I wanted to keep the baby. I didn't think he would understand. When my mother came to visit, Howard surprised me with a call. I couldn't hide my condition. "Jesus, I have a family," he shouted. "I can't be part of this. This is why I didn't tell you." I yelled back. "Get out." I had a baby boy, Lucas. I thought it was fair to tell Howard. Years passed, and then he reached out, saying he wanted to visit. I was hesitant but agreed, wanting him to be part of Lucas's life. "I won't stop you," I said, "but I don't want him getting hurt." We arranged visits every few months, but Lucas didn't understand why his dad never stayed long. I couldn't explain it. Howard, you need to tell your wife, I insisted. That's not going to happen, he laughed. You knew what this was, imagine. I'm not going to ruin my marriage. Maybe I'll tell her myself, I challenged. Don't threaten me, he warned, pushing me against the wall. Daddy, Lucas exclaimed. What are you doing? Nothing, Howard replied, releasing me. Just go play. In the following weeks, I contemplated how to tell Howard's wife about Lucas. I didn't care about my relationship with him anymore. I started searching online, but found nothing substantial. It was mostly straightforward to locate a residence, but they lived only a few hours away. Lucas, we're going for a drive, I announced one evening, strapping him into the back seat as light rain fell. Before leaving, I messaged Howard with his address, informing him of our route. My phone lit up with calls and texts, but I ignored them as night fell. The rain intensified, forcing me to slow down on the highway. I noticed a car behind me, flashing its lights and honking the horn. My phone buzzed again. It was Howard. Pull over, he shouted over the speakers. Stay back, I yelled. Mom, I'm scared, Lucas said. Howard, this is dangerous. Pull over. I finished the call, setting firm boundaries. Suddenly, Howard sped up and crashed into us, making us both scream. Why is Daddy doing this? Lucas cried. Because he's a bad man, I replied. Howard pulled up beside us and swerved into my car, causing me to lose control and careen down the embankment. Lucas shouted as we came to a sudden stop. I focused and saw a metal tower looming over us, red lights flashing in the darkness. Rain poured through the shattered windows. Lucas was quiet. I tried to escape, but my legs were pinned. Lucas, I cried, but there was no response. I reached for my phone, but Howard leaned in through the window and took it from me. You made me do this, he said, his gloved hands on either side of my head. I took a deep breath and suddenly I was back in the closet, overwhelmed with emotions. Imagine released my arms and I nearly collapsed. You see, she said, he's not what you think he is. Sorry, I said, wiping away my tears. That's when I remembered the most important thing in my life, Oscar. I dashed out of the storage room, panting as Imogen appeared in the foyer. They're coming home, she said. What? Howard is driving home now. I checked my phone and saw several missed calls and an angry voicemail from Howard. I could hear Oscar whimpering in the background. Were you really going to tell me that Oscar's little friend is named Lucas? You didn't think that was something important to mention? Jesus Christ, Sasha, you made me feel like I was going crazy. We're going back. Pack some things because that house can burn to the ground. Oh God, I said. He has my child. I don't know what to do. Imogen held my hands, her touch cold. You're a good mother. You'll know what to do. I headed downstairs, my heart racing. I paced back and forth until I heard a vehicle pull up in the garage. The front door burst open. Sasha, Howard shouted. I stood in the kitchen as he came in, holding Oscar by the arm. Come here, darling, I said, reaching out to Oscar. No, Howard said. Go upstairs and start packing. We're leaving. Howard, please. I pleaded, moving closer. You're scaring him. You're scaring me. Are you serious? Howard snapped. We're living in a scary place and I'm the one scaring you? Oscar's friend Lucas is just a coincidence. He's not. Don't gaslight me, he jeered. Okay, I said, we'll leave. Just let me help him. I reached out and pulled Oscar close. How can you let go of his arm? Be quick about it, he said. I went upstairs with Oscar. Did he hurt you? I asked. He shook his head. No, but he was screaming. He said Lucas and his mom are ghosts who want to kill us. I hugged him tightly. Oscar, your dad is having some issues right now. I promise, Lucas and his mom are good. They don't want to hurt us. Okay, he said as we entered his room. Can I bring some toys too? Before we start packing, I want you to stay here with Lucas, all right? Don't leave this room until I come back. Do you understand? He nodded. Yes, Mom. I closed the door behind me and listened for a moment until I heard him talking to Lucas. "Please take care of my boy," I whispered as I headed back downstairs. "Where's Oscar?" Howard demanded. "I wanted to talk to you alone." "I don't want to say anything that might upset him," I replied. "Jesus, we can't handle this," he said. "Pack your things, we're leaving." He gestured toward the stairs. "I trust you," I said, but he froze. "What?" "I saw her," I said, pointing to the downstairs bathroom. Howard slowly turned his head toward the door. "She's upset. I think it would be best if you talk to her." "No," he shouted. "You're out of your goddamn mind. Please, Howard. She just wants peace." I could see his hand shake as he moved toward the bathroom. "Peace? If you want peace, you hear me? You're not wanted here." I rushed forward and pushed Howard into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the doorknob as he pounded on the door, shouting curses. "Help!" I cried into the phone. "My husband is trying to force my child and me out of our home, and he's done something terrible, something really horrible." I screamed as the wooden door began to splinter under Howard's force. He broke through, his face contorted with rage. "Help!" I shouted, dropping my phone. Howard lunged at me, and I bolted through the back door, racing down the dim garden toward the shed. He grabbed my hair from behind, but I turned and kneed him between the legs, making him stagger back. I dashed into the shed and slammed the door behind me, breathless. The first thing I noticed was the strong smell of pine and the heat. It was warm in the shed from the wax pot I had forgotten to turn off earlier. The pot was full, the warning light flashing, making odd noises. Suddenly, the shed window shattered as a large rock crashed through it. Howard was practically foaming at the mouth as he climbed through the broken glass. I backed against the door, trying to force it open again. "Please, Howard." I cried. "Don't you dare hurt me." He scoffed, and the wind was knocked out of me as the door swung open, and I fell onto my back. I looked up to see Howard's stunned expression as a hand grabbed his shoulder from behind. "No, wait," he shouted before Imogen drove his head into the wax pot. His arms flailed as he made choking sounds. She looked at me, then the door slammed shut. I have no idea how long I was there. It all felt like a blur. Eventually, the sounds of Howard's struggles faded, replaced by the sound of sirens approaching the house.